Okay, I like to start these talks uh, on spirituality or whatever. Who knows where I'm going with this? With a painting, with a piece of artwork. So this is a piece of artwork by my wife June, who's an artist and does terrific work. It's we call it the angel. You can see the wings are music and so on, and as she's shining forth. And I think this is a very positive um, painting that shows us a possible path to open up spiritually. You can see the rest of it here. Okay. So we've talked about the need for conceptual frameworks. We've talked about the true nature of who we are. There is an essence, a soul, whatever you want to call it, where we connect with the divine. And the as I've said in Vedic philosophy, the term is the Atman, which is the soul, is the same as the Brahman, which is the creator God, or what we call God, which I mentioned last time. So the path, how we find who we are, is through the experience of joy. Maybe we haven't experienced joy in a long time, but we have it probably at some point in our lives. It's very rare if you haven't. But that consciousness that feels that joy is who we really are, as opposed to all our ability to handle things, uh, dealing with problems with the job, with relationships, and finding ways to do this and figuring stuff out. Well, that's has nothing to do with that consciousness that experiences joy, because when you experience joy, you kind of that all those considerations or what you're going to eat for breakfast or lunch or dinner start fading away, and you just become one with the experience of joy, the experience of nature, whatever it is that inspires that joy. And beauty is a part of that. So, in one of Plato's dialogues, uh, he said that seeing beauty is really the remembrance of when we were one with God. In other words, one with who we really are. And I struggled with this concept because it was given to me when I was still a teen, and I just didn't understand it, and I struggled with it because I thought, well, how can that be? If I'm one with everything else, then where am I? I can't be everything because that's the same as nothing, really. So what I learned, both through what I was given as information and what I read and researched over a long time in all the spiritual traditions, was that that connection to God is actually it's paradoxical. It's actually the most unique and um, personal parts of us that isn't like anybody else. So how can that be that we're the same as God in the sense that the Vedas tell us, but at the same time, we're totally ourselves, and that part of us that is most uniquely who we are is actually the divine. When I had the experience, which I related in one of the videos, of being experiencing what consider the kingdom of heaven, because it's actually similar to other descriptions. I was thinking specifically of C.S. Lewis, the writer who wrote the Chronicles of Narnia and so on. That experience was just overwhelming, and you can't deny it. It was accidental. I didn't like try to have it. I didn't take any drug, nothing like that at all. It made me see how that it can be, as I said, uniquely me who experienced that is the most unique part of us, myself, and the most universal and connected with everything that is. So that's a paradox because we do not see multidimensionally. We have hints of multidimensionality multidimensionality through science, through physics particularly, and quantum physics and its variations. Since the 1920s and 30s, when quantum physics was developed, it's kind of developed and fleshed out quite a bit. So that physicists, many physicists, not all physicists, because if you dwell too much on that, you're liable to lose your job. But most thoughtful physicists say that the universe is actually intelligent. And it's now becoming very, very popular. And I don't think it's as dangerous as it was when I think Max Planck, one of the famous physicist, first posited that way back, I think in the 30s or 40s, or maybe earlier. But anyway, all matter, all the universe is conscious and aware. It's a level of awareness we might not understand, just as we don't really understand the level of awareness of one of our pets, a dog, for example. But that changes the whole framework. If we really research and take our time to research physics, neuroscience, biology, different levels of of the nature of living things, we'll find that what we were taught by the school systems, by the official documentaries, the anything you'll see in mainstream media is just not right. We do not live in a materialistic. That materialistic idea is just it's just like it's it's way past its due date. It just doesn't work anymore in terms of science. So I've written a chapter in my book, which I haven't published yet, but is beginning to appear on Substack. That, and this was several years ago. When I was doing that, I haven't really expanded on it as much. But science, using science, you overturn science. So I I go to the most famous of the debunkers of official science, uh, who said that let's see what Ioannidis, John A. Ioannidis, who's a teacher, professor at Stanford, did a study of studies around the year 2004 or something like that. And he found that most scientific studies are deeply flawed, such that you can't really believe them. And in my experience, those studies um, are just way off. Often they try to meet the interests and the demands of the funders of that science, which is often the pharmaceutical companies. And you take the whole COVID experience, which massive numbers of people, not the majority necessarily, but an incredible amount of people realized that the whole thing was a fraud from start to finish. It was clearly manufactured in a American lab, not a Chinese lab, as the propagandists claim, but an American lab, and it was accidentally released. Personally, I don't think it was accidental, but I don't know for sure because the United States has been working on germ warfare for many decades since the end of World War II. So uh, people have lost confidence in science and the authorities because science is one thing. Science, capital S, what I call the religion of science or scientism, is something else. It's a belief system where if you diverge from the official findings, which are actually just theocratic statements, you're excommunicated. You're considered a conspiracy theorist or a pseudoscientist. So such things as everything from ghosts to UFOs to paranormal phenomena, however they are, uh, There, you can't, if you do that research and if you report on it, you're finished. You lose your job. Just as many professors today are losing their jobs their tenure if they start trying to criticize Israel and the plight of the Palestinians. So it doesn't really matter. The repression is going to be there anytime you diverge, whether it's science or politics, from the official point of view. So science is one thing, and that the real science has gone in the direction of spirituality by understanding that everything is connected, that two particles, even if they're 1,000 miles apart, are still entangled, what they call entanglement. So if this particle is spinning this way and its mate, which it was connected with before you split them up, is spinning another way, as soon as this starts spinning this way, exactly at the same moment, it'll mimic that spin. So that's called quantum entanglement. It's one of the many proofs that the world is not what we think it is. If there is such a thing as that, and there clearly is, this is uncontroversial in physics, then our whole view of the universe is false. It's not even close. And what we were taught in school, whether it's elementary, high school, or college or graduate school, in fact, it's even worse because colleges and their graduate programs are more they're trainings to fit into a job in the corporate sector, and the corporate sector has to have people thinking the same way, at least to some extent. So the the framework that's been created for us by the current set of authorities, whether it's government, schools, uh, doctors, scientists, whatever, is not correct. They're lying to you. And often they know that, but they can't diverge from it. And I use COVID as an example. I have a friend who's a physician, and he told me that in among physicians, there was always a lot of back and forth and arguments and theories proposed in social situations when they're hanging out or whatever. But after COVID and during COVID, everybody was totally quiet. They wouldn't talk about anything on the scientific level considered that connected to the COVID uh, scare or whatever you want to call it. And there's a lot of nuance to this, and I don't want to simplify it. But the fact is that doctors could not talk about that because they would lose their licenses. If they expressed the skepticism about the official Dr. Fauci line on COVID, they would lose their job and their livelihood. They would be thrown out of the medical profession, and some were. It didn't happen every time. I'm not saying it wasn't like that ruthless. It just that the doctors were smart enough to know what to say, and they managed to, even if they were skeptical, they managed to keep their job, as my friend did. Although they all knew that he, without him saying very much, that he was opposed to the official view. So he was eased out of his job anyway, which is okay because he was retired and he was just working to supplement his income. So the point is that the official view of how things are from any point of view, from the scientific point of view, and then from the religious point of view, the same thing. If you critically read in Christianity, if you critically read the Bible, the official Christian doctrines, either the Catholic Church or the Protestant churches, particularly evangelical churches, is absurd. It's impossible. What they're saying is because the Bible is a set of many, many books, some of them very fascinating, very interesting, but they teach opposite teachings over and over again. So if you read the Pentateuch, which is the first five books of the Bible, it's all about Jews grabbing land and killing the occupants and literally raping them, raping, looting, killing, and it was directed to do that. Israel was told to do that by God, Yahweh, which I don't think was God, because how did they know that? What were prophets in Israel? The prophets in Israel were the same as prophets and currently psychics. They were channeling a spirit. That spirit called itself God of Israel. It protected the tribe, and that was its function. Just as every other tribe probably, because I've studied anthropology as well, and they've all have these kind of things, gods or goddesses or spirits who protect the tribe. And the shaman in that tribe is his job is to propitiate whatever it is to keep that god from harming and get that god to keep protecting the tribe. So Christianity is great if you pay attention to the parts of it that connect with other great spiritual traditions, which the Gospels actually do. But the Gospel message in the Bible is completely opposite of most of the Old Testament. And you know, I don't understand how people can get into the mentality that believing that the Bible, the entire Bible, which again just has different points of view in different books, can be totally God's word to human beings and totally accurate in every single word. And it almost becomes absurd when you look at the page after page of description of priests, the vestments for priests, and the temple, and I mean, just all these little trivial things, what colors and what patterns go together, everything. It's just endless detail on really nothing, which is very similar to other tribal societies. Although the difference is that in with the ancient Israelites, it was written down, or maybe it wasn't. There's some doubt about whether there what when those were written down, and I'm not going to get into that part. The point is that neither science nor at least the Christian religion offer an adequate framework for how to live. Now, there are things specific, probably if you're going to pick two, I would prefer the Christian one because at least it does touch on universal truths, particularly in the New Testament, mainly the four Gospels. So, and those aren't the only Gospels. There are other Gospels that were suppressed that offer even more illumination. And I would recommend those. Elaine Pagels wrote about that in a book called The Gnostic Gospels. And so you can look that up for yourself if you want. But there are other Gospels, and there are many other Gospels, and most of them probably were burned by the Orthodox Christians who came into power somewhere in the 4th century when Constantine, the Emperor Constantine, decided to make Christianity the official religion of the entire empire. So then the Christians got political power. So now they could sort of say, all right, I don't like this guy, these guys. And that part of history with Christianity is full of conflicts and is Jesus completely divine, or is he half divine or not? There were all these insane, silly arguments about doctrine. And eventually they just said, well, this is the way it's going to be, and that's it. Okay. If you don't believe this, we'll kill you. So that's a lot of the origin of Christianity. Of course, that didn't really happen, but that was not everybody that didn't believe the way the church wanted them to believe was killed. But that was the fear that was induced to people that they had to toe the official line. And the advantage of that, of course, was that that would create order in society. And during the so-called Dark Ages, the sort of primitive Germanic tribes who weren't sophisticated, didn't have writing, they began to blend into the old Roman world and create a new society that eventually resulted in the what we now call the medieval period, which was a flowering of civilization in Europe. But I'm not going to get into that right now. The point is that conceptual frameworks are important and that the authorities manipulate the frameworks for their benefit. So, in the case of our period, our period of the frameworks dissolving, because there's a lot of skepticism, particularly religion. There's a lot of people saying, "Well, that can't be right," and that's makes sense. But at the same time, what is your basis for morality? Why not just kill your neighbor if you can get away with it, right? I mean, I want what I want, so I'm going to go get it. And if you don't give it to me, I'll hurt you, or kill you, or torture you, do whatever the hell I want. And that's that's a reality that rubs a lot of people the wrong way. But why does it rub them the wrong way? What's the basis of morality? Why should we care about our neighbor? Without a fundamental background into what it means to be a embodied soul, like each of us humans, just say that without all the other creatures, but just us. If we if we if we harm somebody else, what's wrong with that? How does that affect us? How does that harm us? And so what by positing that we are in ourselves perfect just the way we are, if we in ourselves are both completely unique and a part of something greater and connected to all that is, and particularly all human beings, then if I kill my neighbor and I can get away with it, I'm really killing a part of myself because I'm connected to that person. So that framework is very important. And it doesn't have to be understood intellectually. It doesn't have to be a rule. But if we feel it emotionally through the heart, we can the heart which when we're totally ourselves only can feel love. How can you kill someone when you feel only love for them? Unless they're suffering horribly or something like that, then it's understandable. But still, it's a prohibition that makes a lot of sense. And to harm other people in any way makes a lot of sense when we understand our deep connection to others and that other people may be very different from us. And it's good that they're very different from us because that is the plenitude of the universe that we have inherited. So I'm talking about a basis for a conceptual framework that doesn't include what the authorities tell us. It comes from inside. In sociology, we were taught it's called inner directed. We're either inner directed or outer directed. So outer directed is through authorities. Well, now the authorities, and I don't see how you can avoid this, the authorities have completely lost their legitimacy. And particularly the latest, not only COVID, the latest revelations on the Epstein files, which are just even a tiny sliver of what's really going on and what I've researched for decades. And I can assure you that the oligarchs that run the world are really, really nasty. And they're not nasty because internally they're nasty. In other words, their soul is still there, but it's covered up by this layer of evil, which is a kind of negative spiritual work. They literally don't believe that you or me are as important or fully human the way they are. They're superior. And that was at the heart of Epstein's project, which is to try to create a breed of human being that is superior to the current breed, whatever that is. that they were going to, through science, through occult, and it's funny because they combined science and sort of occult or spiritual dark practices. And at heart of these oligarchs are dark practices because their goal is to have power over others. Their goal is to get what they want at your expense. And the pleasure, the joy, in quotation marks, that they have lacked by being in contact with their own souls, they can now have by being completely contrary to that by a kind of dark side. So if you've seen Star Wars, obviously you understand that there is something called the dark side of the Force. And that dark side of the Force is very powerful. And it is it's addictive. So these people are addicted to negativity. They're addicted to power and force, the use of force to get people to do what they want. So you see this very, what's interesting at this time is that all these negative and evil forces are now plain as day. So you have the president of the United States going out and threatening other countries that if you don't do what we want, then we're gonna fuck you up. That's, I mean, that's essentially, it's like the streets when I was younger, you know? It was a balance of terror. If you didn't do what a kind of a powerful gangster wanted, well, you know, you can just picture it, the Godfather movies and all that kind of stuff. That's real. That I saw it. I knew these people. I was threatened by them. So I know all about that. So that use of force is used to be called gangsterism, and that's what is official policy of your country. So this using force to coerce people to do whatever you want, and who knows? You could argue that what those gangsters want to do is positive in some way. I don't know. This brings me to the other side of the talk, which is yes, our conceptual frameworks are inadequate to fully explain and understand where we're at right now and how to navigate the rest of our lives. The authorities have, you cannot follow the authorities. If you do, you're just being weak. You're just being weak minded and cowardly. You at least can break away from their conditioning, from their propaganda in schools, in the media, the big corporate media, who are only about, either all they want is profits and power. That's it. They don't care about you. They can't care about you because of the way they're structured. And what I experienced when I was in government was that there are many nice, there were great people in the military and the CIA and the State Department and all these, Commerce Department I worked at and many other places. These were, many of them were just fine people, just like any of us. But the system that was developed over time was increasingly oppressive. And so it was, they just had to go along because if they didn't go along, well, I mean, they had kids, they had mortgages, they had, whatever they had. They had to go along to get along. That was the way it was. And the saying, of course, we all had was that no good deed goes unpunished. So we knew that blowing the whistle or doing that was going to give us a wealth of troubles. The stories we heard, I mean, these were dramatic stories of whistleblowers. Even with so-called whistleblower protection, it doesn't really work that way. They really mess people up. So what I'm trying to tell you is that forget the authorities, whether they're political authorities, whether they're authority or doctors, because doctors have to go along. Okay, they can't start saying, "Oh yeah, well if you chant for 3 hours, you can get rid of your kidney stones or whatever." No, maybe that's ridiculous. I don't know, but maybe it works. But if let's say it did work, you would be thrown out of the profession. You couldn't say that. So authorities just even of any kind, they're just so susceptible to the temptations of materialism, if I go along with this, well, I'm going to make a lot of money. I can buy all kinds of things. I can attract women and or men or whatever it is you're interested in. It's going to give me so many benefits. So why am I going to throw that out just for the truth? What does the truth mean? Who knows what the truth is? Well, the truth, this is why we need a framework that works, why its foundation has to be in the awareness of who we are, deeply we are, our souls. So if it's good for our souls, if it brings joy, particularly, and love and consideration for others, because it's not just self-satisfaction, because once you connect with that love energy, it becomes really easy to feel love and compassion for all, which may be acted out in completely different ways. For me, it's a little different because I'm very much of an introvert, and it's very difficult because I don't interact with a lot of people, and that's unique to me, and that's a whole thing of describing people. I've used astrology for that for a long time. I've studied it since the late 70s. So I could see the truth in that. Not that I'm great at it. I'm pretty good. I've done a lot of charts, but every chart is unique, and that just as every personality is unique. And so what's good for me and what expresses my divinity and my connection to all that is quite different from the way you do. I have a daughter who's well known in certain circles in Europe. Well, that was indicated in her chart. I told her that. Uh, and another son who's having a lot of difficulty, but I mean he's prosperous, but he's not. But his personal life's kind of sucks, and I know what he's about. And then they're all the kids are different. They all had um, different ways of being, even though they were raised by the same parents. So how does that work? Why are they so different? It's not just the charts, though. It's also the what people come in with and what they've decided to do in life. And I'm not going to get into that because it's mysterious. Because I don't understand how astrology works. I don't understand how divination works. I don't understand how the tarot works or any kind of or how psychics get their information. Is it valid? Is it not valid? Eh, some of it seems right, and some of it doesn't seem so correct. Why wouldn't it be correct if it's correct most of the time? So anyway, all these questions are great mysteries. And as long as we are attached to the three-dimensional world, we're never going to figure it out because there are more dimensions. And I think even physics, of course, many physicists have been talking about that for a long time. There are many dimensions, and we can't possibly understand our world without understanding that there are other dimensions because this mysterious stuff happens. Suddenly, an alien comes up. Okay, I had some being come and visit me. Uh, my wife June was abducted by a spaceship. Oh, what's that? How can that doesn't make any sense normally. That's crazy. I've seen things, that can't literally exist with other people at the same time. So the world as described in the school books and in by the government and the corporations and everything else, that's a bullshit. That just that's just a very thin layer. They create something called the Overton window, which is what's allowable, what the framework is that we can talk about. So we can't talk about certain things. Some certain things are illegal, and parts of, particularly in two countries, and one is Britain, the UK, and one is Germany. That it's literally you can get in trouble for criticizing Israel, the state of Israel, a country. So you have to keep yourself quiet. So let's go back to frameworks. The framework allows for the fourth and fifth dimension, the other dimensions. Some people call time the fourth dimension. So let's say the fifth dimension and upwards. Some scientists say there are about 12 or 13 dimensions. They describe it very differently. Some people talk about parallel worlds, and sometimes they intersect. There's a book I may not have talked about called Flatland, which is which is when a sphere invaded a flatland two-dimensional world. So a three-dimensional object came in, and a certain character called a certain square saw it and had to explain it to his fellows, and he ended up in jail. Okay, let's put it that way. Didn't make any. They thought he was crazy, but he experienced it. And so those of us who have experienced a reality outside of the normal Overton window, we're considered weirdos, conspiracy theorists, we're called all kinds of names. But science, observation, logic shows us that these phenomena have existed throughout human recorded history. Because I can go back and open up a book from the ancients, and they'll talk about this stuff. Everybody knew that there was this sort of God dimension of different spirits and different things going on that are, crazy. So for us, are crazy, but for them, they had in the ancient civilizations, and even as soon as maybe 300 years ago, psychic phenomena were not discounted. I mean, even they even freaked out about it because they knew it was happening, and that's why they pointed at witches and then executed them, whatever they did, which was terrible. But that was because of fear. And the problem with religion is that while it can keep you into some kind of order when you've got a lot to do, you can't think these things out. You can't create a new conceptual framework all by yourself. But we live at a time, sorry, we have to do that. And we can't just expect some authority to do it for us. So we have to do it. So I think I think we'll end that now, and I'll see you next time with my fourth. This is my third, and I'll be talking about this kind of stuff for a while. I plan to do this, as I said, every other day, not on weekends, um, or every day, depending on what's going on. So until next time.